The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers for the third time tonight, clattering onto the concrete floor of my garage with a loud noise. Above me, the rusted undercarriage of Mrs. Peterson's ancient Honda Civic dripped oil onto my forehead, a fitting metaphor for my life, really. Through the thin walls, I could hear the shrill laughter of my wife's friends, their voices cutting through the summer night like broken glass. "Brad's such a loser!" Natalie's voice rang out clear as a bell, followed by another round of cackling. "I mean, seriously, who fixes cars for a living anymore? It's 2025. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I wiped the oil from my face with the back of my hand, leaving a black smear that probably made me look like some kind of deranged mechanic, which, considering my current mental state, wasn't far from the truth. The party inside was supposed to be for Natalie's 36th birthday, but it had turned into yet another opportunity for her to showcase what a disappointment her husband was. The garage door was open, letting in the humid Missouri air and the sounds of suburban revelry. I could see the glow of string lights through the kitchen window, casting everything in that fake, Instagram-perfect ambiance that Natalie loved so much. She'd spent $300 on decorations alone, money we didn't have, for people who didn't care about anything except appearances. "You know what Brad told me last week?" Natalie's voice carried perfectly through the night air. She had that particular tone she used when she was about to deliver a punchline at my expense. "He suggested we take a vacation to Branson. Branson! Like some kind of hillbilly honeymoon. I told him we might as well just camp in the Walmart parking lot." The laughter that followed felt like needles in my ears. I recognized the voices: Derek from the gym where Natalie had started working out 3 months ago, Jessa, her best friend and self-proclaimed social media influencer, and a handful of other people who'd never given me the time of day when I wasn't married to someone they wanted to impress. I crawled out from under the Honda and stood up, my back protesting after 4 hours of bent-over work. At 38, I was starting to feel every year, especially after long days at the shop, followed by evenings spent fixing neighbors' cars for extra cash. The cash that paid for Natalie's gym membership, her weekly manicures, and apparently overpriced birthday parties. Through the window, I could see them all gathered around our kitchen island, the one I'd installed myself last spring. Natalie was holding court in a dress that cost more than most people's car payments, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the humidity. She looked beautiful, I had to admit. She always looked beautiful. That was part of the problem. Derek was standing close to her, closer than necessary, his hand resting on the small of her back. He was one of those guys who looked like he'd stepped out of a fitness magazine, all white teeth and sculpted muscles, the kind of man who'd never had grease under his fingernails or worried about making rent. He owned a chain of boutique gyms that catered to people with more money than sense, and he drove a BMW that probably cost more than I made in 2 years. "The thing about Brad," Natalie continued, apparently not done with her character assassination, "is that he has no ambition, no vision. He's perfectly content fixing other people's broken-down cars for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, I'm out there building a real career in real estate, making real money." I almost laughed at that. Natalie had sold exactly 3 houses in the past year, all of them to friends of friends who felt sorry for her. Her real estate career was about as successful as my attempts to get her to show me basic human respect. Jessa's voice chimed in, sweet as poisoned honey. "You deserve so much better, Nat. You're smart, you're gorgeous, you're successful. You could have anyone you wanted." "I know," Natalie replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd made different choices." That was my cue. I'd heard enough. I walked through the side door into our kitchen, still wearing my oil-stained coveralls and work boots. The conversation stopped mid-sentence, and suddenly 8 pairs of eyes were staring at me like I'd just tracked mud through a museum. Oh, Natalie said, her voice flat with disappointment. You're done playing with your cars? Just finished Mrs. Peterson's Honda, I replied, grabbing a beer from the refrigerator. Transmission was shot. Fixed it for $200. She was so grateful she almost cried. Derek snorted. $200? Dude, that's like what? Half a day's pay for a real job? I looked at him over my beer bottle, taking in his designer polo shirt and perfectly styled hair. You're right, Derek. It's not much. But then again, I actually earned it instead of inheriting Daddy's money to play gym teacher. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Derek's face flushed red, and I could see his jaw clench. Apparently, I'd hit a nerve. At least Derek has goals, Natalie snapped. At least he's trying to build something meaningful with his life. Meaningful? I laughed, and it came out harsher than I intended. He sells overpriced exercise equipment to housewives who want to feel special. That's not meaningful, that's predatory. How dare you? Derek started, but Natalie cut him off. That's enough, Brad. You're embarrassing yourself. Again. She said it with such casual cruelty that it took my breath away. Not because it hurt. I was used to her little barbs by now, but because she'd said it in front of all these people who were already looking for reasons to dismiss me. You know what, Natalie? I said, setting my beer down on the counter with deliberate calm. You're absolutely right. She blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. What? You're right. I am embarrassing myself. I'm embarrassing myself by pretending this marriage means something. I'm embarrassing myself by working my ass off to pay for parties where my own wife treats me like garbage. I'm embarrassing myself by caring what any of you people think. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the music seemed to have stopped. Brad, Natalie started, but I held up a hand. No, let me finish. You want to know what's really embarrassing? It's that I've spent 5 years of my life with someone who thinks success is measured by how much money you can spend on things you don't need to impress people you don't like. It's that I've been trying to build a life with someone who sees me as a liability instead of a partner. I looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. You all think I'm a loser? Fine. You're probably right. But at least I'm not a fake, and I'm not a parasite. And I'm not so desperate for validation that I have to tear other people down to feel good about myself. Jessa had her phone out, and I could see she was recording. Perfect. This would probably be on her Instagram story within the hour, with some caption about toxic masculinity or supporting your girlfriends or whatever hashtag was trending. You want to know what I think is embarrassing? I continued, my voice getting louder. I think it's embarrassing that you're 36 years old and you still act like you're in high school. I think it's embarrassing that you measure your worth by how many likes you get on social media. And I think it's really embarrassing that you're so insecure about your own life that you have to make mine miserable just to feel better about yourself. Natalie's face had gone white, then red, then white again. Get out, she whispered. What? Get out! She screamed, her voice cracking. Get out of my house! Get out of my party! Get out of my life! I nodded slowly, like she'd just confirmed something I'd suspected all along. Your house? Funny, I don't remember seeing your name on the mortgage payments. But you're right about one thing. I should get out. I should have gotten out a long time ago. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Oh, and Derek? Next time you want to insult someone's job, maybe make sure you're not standing in a kitchen they renovated themselves, in a house they're paying for, drinking beer they bought with money they actually earned. The last thing I saw before I walked out was Jess's phone, still recording, and the look of absolute fury on Natalie's face. The last thing I heard was Derek saying, "Dude, what a psycho," followed by nervous laughter. I drove to Marty's bar in silence, my hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. Marty's was the kind of place where nobody cared what you did for a living or how much money you made. It was dark and honest and real. Everything my life at home wasn't. Marty himself was behind the bar, a mountain of a man with graying hair and arms covered in tattoos from his Navy days. He took one look at me and poured a double whiskey without being asked. "Rough night?" he asked. "You could say that." I downed the whiskey in one gulp and gestured for another. I think I just ended my marriage. "About time," Marty said, refilling my glass. "That woman's been treating you like dirt for years. We've all seen it." "Yeah, well, now the whole town's gonna see it. Jessa was filming the whole thing." Marty snorted. "Jessa Martinez, that fake influencer? Hell, Brad, that might be the best thing that could happen to you. Let people see what you've been dealing with." I wasn't so sure about that. In a town like Millbrook, reputation was everything, and mine was about to become a cautionary tale about what happened when blue-collar guys tried to punch above their weight class. My phone buzzed with a text message, then another, then another. By the time I turned it off, I'd received 17 messages, most of them from numbers I didn't recognize. Word traveled fast in a small town, especially when it involved public humiliation and social media. "You know what the worst part is?" I said to Marty. "I actually loved her. For 5 years, I actually believed we were building something together." "Love's a hell of a thing," Marty agreed. "Makes smart men do stupid things, but it sounds like you're done being stupid." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, I'm just getting started." The next morning, I woke up on Marty's couch with a hangover that felt like divine punishment and 17 missed calls from Natalie. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't need to. I could imagine exactly what they said, probably starting with anger, moving through manipulation, and ending with threats. It was her standard playbook. My phone buzzed with a new text. "We need to talk. Come home now." I deleted it and got dressed. I had work to do. Millbrook Automotive wasn't much to look at from the outside. A cinder-block building with bay doors and a hand-painted sign that had seen better days. But it was mine, bought and paid for with 10 years of 16-hour days and careful saving. It was the one thing in my life that Natalie couldn't take credit for, couldn't criticize, couldn't control. My partner Jake was already there when I arrived, bent over the engine of a Ford pickup that looked older than both of us combined. He looked up when I walked in, his expression somewhere between concerned and amused. "So," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, "I hear you had an interesting evening. Let me guess, it's all over Facebook already?" Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, probably carved into a tree somewhere by now. Jessa's video has been shared about 1,000 times. "You're famous, buddy." I groaned and grabbed my coveralls from the hook by the door. "How bad is it?" "Well, depends on your perspective. Half the comments are calling you an abusive asshole who should be ashamed of himself for embarrassing his wife in public. The other half are saying it's about time someone called out Natalie and her crowd for being shallow, materialistic snobs." Great. So I'm either a villain or a hero, depending on who you ask. Welcome to the internet, my friend. Nuance is gone. I spent the morning trying to lose myself in work, but it was impossible to concentrate. Every time the bell above the door chimed, I expected to see Natalie storming in with divorce papers or a sheriff's deputy with some kind of restraining order. Instead, it was a steady stream of customers who suddenly needed their oil changed or their brakes checked, people who'd never set foot in my shop before, but were clearly hoping to get a first-hand look at Millbrook's newest celebrity. Around noon, the bell chimed again, and this time it was Mrs. DeWitt, the 70-year-old gossip queen who lived 3 houses down from me. She was carrying a casserole dish and wearing the kind of expression that meant she had information to share. "Bradley, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I brought you some tuna noodle casserole. I thought you might need a good meal, what with all the unpleasantness." "That's very kind of you, Mrs. DeWitt." I accepted the casserole, knowing full well that this was the price of admission for whatever she was about to tell me. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but I think you showed remarkable restraint last night. If my Harold had ever spoken to me the way that Derek person was speaking to you, well..." She trailed off meaningfully. "Derek was speaking to me?" Mrs. DeWitt's eyes lit up. She'd been hoping I'd ask. "Oh, my dear boy, you didn't hear? After you left, that awful man spent 20 minutes telling everyone what he thought of you. Called you a pathetic loser and a small-town nobody. Said Natalie deserved better than a grease monkey with delusions of grandeur." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. He said that? Oh, that's not even the worst part. He told everyone that Natalie had been complaining about you for months. Said she was too classy for someone like you, and that she'd come to her senses eventually. The wrench in my hand was suddenly very heavy. And what did Natalie say to all this? Mrs. DeWitt's smile was sharp as a blade. She didn't say anything, dear. She just sat there and let him talk, nodding along like she agreed with every word. After Mrs. DeWitt left, I sat in my office staring at the casserole and trying to process what I'd just learned. It was one thing for Natalie to humiliate me in front of her friends. That was just her being her usual selfish self. But to sit there and let some other man tear me apart while she nodded along, that was something else entirely. My phone rang. Natalie's number. "What?" I answered. "Brad, thank God. Listen, we need to talk about last night. I think there were some misunderstandings." "Were there?" "Of course there were. You know how you get when you've been drinking. You say things you don't mean, you take things the wrong way." "I had one beer, Natalie." "Well, whatever. The point is, people are talking. Jess's video has been seen by half the town, and it doesn't look good for either of us. We need to do damage control." "Damage control?" "Yes. I think you should apologize. Publicly. Maybe we could do a Facebook Live together, show everyone that we're working through our problems like mature adults." I almost laughed. "Let me get this straight. You want me to apologize for calling you out on your behavior so that you can save face with your friends? I want you to apologize for embarrassing me in front of everyone I care about. And what about Derek? Should I apologize to him too? For interrupting his little speech about what a pathetic loser I am?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." Mrs. DeWitt was very informative. "Apparently your boyfriend had a lot to say about me after I left." "He's not my boyfriend, and I can't control what other people say." "But you can control whether you sit there and nod along while they say it." More silence. Then, in a voice like ice, "If you're not willing to work on this marriage, then maybe we don't have a marriage to work on." "Maybe we don't." She hung up without another word. That evening, I drove past our house on my way back from Marty's. Derek's BMW was in the driveway again. It had been there a lot lately, I realized. 3, maybe 4 times a week for the past month. I'd never thought much about it before. Natalie was always having friends over, always networking or planning some social event or another. But now, seeing that car in my driveway while I was sleeping on my friend's couch, it felt different. I parked across the street and watched the house for a while. The lights were on in the living room, and I could see 2 silhouettes on the couch. They were sitting close together, closer than friends usually sat. As I watched, one of the silhouettes leaned over and kissed the other. I sat there for a long time, watching my wife kiss another man in the living room of the house I paid for, and I felt something inside me change. Not break. It had been broken for a while now. This was different. This was the moment when I stopped caring about being the good guy, stopped caring about taking the high road, stopped caring about what people would think. They wanted a villain? I could give them a villain. I spent the next week planning. Not plotting exactly. That word implied something sinister and illegal. I was simply gathering information and considering my options. It's amazing how much you can learn about people when you start paying attention. Derek, for instance, wasn't quite the successful businessman he pretended to be. A little research revealed that his chain of boutique gyms consisted of 2 locations, one of which was hemorrhaging money and facing foreclosure. His BMW was leased, his apartment was rented, and according to public records, He owed the IRS about $40,000 in back taxes. Natalie's real estate career was even more fictional than I'd thought. She'd sold 3 houses in 18 months, and 2 of those sales had fallen through due to her failure to properly disclose foundation problems. Her real estate license was up for renewal next month, and she hadn't completed the required continuing education credits. But the most interesting discovery was about Jessa. Our local influencer claimed to have 50,000 Instagram followers and regularly promoted various products and services. What she didn't mention was that most of those followers were bots, purchased from a service that specialized in fake social media engagement. Her successful lifestyle was funded entirely by maxed-out credit cards and a series of increasingly desperate sponsorship deals with companies that didn't bother to verify her actual reach. All of this information was publicly available if you knew where to look. I didn't hack anything, didn't break any laws, didn't even stretch the truth. I simply did what any good mechanic does when faced with a problem. I looked under the hood. The first move was subtle. Derek's gym had been having problems with their HVAC system. I knew this because he'd complained about it loudly at Natalie's party. So when the heat wave hit Millbrook the following week, and his air conditioning system mysteriously developed a refrigerant leak that would take days to repair, well, that was just bad luck. Of course, I was the one who'd installed that system 2 years ago, and I knew exactly which valve to loosen to create a slow leak that wouldn't be immediately obvious. I also knew that Derek was too cheap to pay for emergency service, which meant his gym would be a sweltering hellhole for at least 3 days during the hottest week of the summer. The anonymous Yelp reviews started appearing the next day. Went to Fit Life Gym during the heat wave, and it was like working out in a sauna. Staff was rude and unhelpful, would not recommend. Overpriced and poorly maintained. Equipment is constantly broken. Owner seems more interested in hitting on female clients than running a professional business. None of the reviews were lies, exactly. The gym really was overpriced, the equipment really was poorly maintained, and Derek really did spend most of his time flirting with married women instead of managing his business. I just helped people notice these things. Natalie's comeuppance required a more delicate touch. I couldn't do anything that would directly impact her real estate license. That would be too obvious, and probably illegal. But I could make sure that her boss, Brian Kellerman, knew exactly how she'd been spending her work hours. Brian was the kind of man who measured success in billable hours and closed deals. He didn't care if his agents were happy or fulfilled, as long as they were making money for the agency. So when he received an anonymous email with time-stamped photos of Natalie spending her afternoons at the gym instead of showing houses, along with a detailed breakdown of her actual sales numbers versus her reported activity, he was not pleased. The photos were easy to get. The gym had floor-to-ceiling windows facing the parking lot, and I had a telephoto lens left over from my brief attempt at photography as a hobby. The sales numbers came straight from the county records office, which maintained a public database of all real estate transactions. But Jessa was the real prize. Her entire existence was built on lies and artificial engagement, which made her particularly vulnerable to the truth. It started with a simple comment on one of her Instagram posts. "Hey, Jessa Martinez, did you know that buying fake followers is against Instagram's terms of service? Just wondering why 80% of your followers have no profile pictures and haven't posted anything in 6 months." The comment was deleted within minutes, but screenshots are forever. I posted them to a Reddit forum dedicated to exposing fake influencers, along with a detailed analysis of her follower demographics and engagement patterns. The post went viral within hours. Her sponsors started pulling out the next day. Apparently, companies don't like being associated with fraud, even the small-scale, pathetic kind that Jessa specialized in. Her follower count began dropping as Instagram's algorithm started identifying and removing the bot accounts she'd purchased. By Friday, Derek's gym had lost a dozen members, Natalie had been placed on performance improvement at work, and Jessa's influencer career was circling the drain. None of it could be traced back to me directly, But I knew they suspected. The question was, what were they going to do about it? I got my answer Saturday morning when I arrived at the shop to find Derek waiting for me in the parking lot. He was trying to look intimidating, but it's hard to pull off when you're sweating through a designer polo shirt and your face is red from heat exhaustion. "We need to talk," he said. "Do we?" I unlocked the front door and walked inside, leaving it open behind me. He followed, which I'd expected. "You know what you did." "I know what I do every day. I fix cars, I run a business, I mind my own affairs. Maybe you should try that last one sometime." His face got redder. "Don't play dumb with me, Brad. The gym, the reviews, the HVAC system, that's not a coincidence." "You're right," I said, pulling on my coveralls. "It's not a coincidence. It's incompetence. Your incompetence. You run a shitty business, you treat people badly, and now you're facing the consequences. That's not my fault. And what about Natalie's job? What about Jessa's sponsors?" I looked at him with genuine surprise. "What about them? Are you telling me that Natalie's been lying to her boss about her work schedule? Are you saying that Jessa's been committing fraud? Because if that's true, then they're getting exactly what they deserve." He stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can just destroy people's lives because your feelings got hurt?" "Destroy?" I laughed. "Derek, I haven't destroyed anything. I've just helped people see the truth. If the truth is destructive, maybe you should examine your life choices. This isn't over." "You're right. It's not." I picked up a wrench from my workbench and hefted it thoughtfully. "See, the thing about truth is that once it starts coming out, it's hard to stop. And I've learned some very interesting things about you lately. Things about unpaid taxes and business loans and certain activities that the IRS might find very interesting." The color drained from his face. "You wouldn't. Try me." He left without another word, but I knew this was just the beginning. They were going to escalate, which meant I needed to be ready for whatever came next. The escalation came sooner than I expected. Sunday afternoon, I was at Marty's watching the Cardinals game when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, every social media platform I'd ever signed up for was lighting up with mentions and tags. Jessa had posted a video, not just any video, a carefully edited masterpiece that told a very specific story about the kind of man I was. It started with footage from Natalie's party, but not the part where I'd called them out. This was the aftermath, after I'd left, showing Natalie crying while her friends comforted her. "This is what emotional abuse looks like," Jessa's voice narrated over the video. "It's not always physical violence. Sometimes it's psychological manipulation, public humiliation, and systematic attempts to control and isolate your partner." The video went on to show evidence of my abusive behavior, screenshots of text messages that had been taken out of context, photos of me stalking Natalie, actually just me coming home from work, and testimonials from people who'd witnessed my controlling behavior over the years. It was masterfully done, I had to admit. Every piece of evidence was technically true, but presented in a way that painted me as a dangerous, unstable man who'd been psychologically tormenting my wife for years. The video ended with a call to action. If you know someone who's experiencing emotional abuse, please reach out. Help them find the resources they need to escape safely. Within hours, the video had been shared thousands of times. The comments were brutal. "What a monster. That poor woman." This is exactly why women don't leave abusive relationships. They're afraid of what will happen. Someone should call the police. This man is dangerous. I hope she gets a restraining order. My phone started ringing. First my mother, then my sister, then customers, then people I hadn't spoken to in years, all of them wanting to know if the allegations were true, if I was okay, if I needed help. The worst part was that some of them seemed to believe it. By Monday morning, I'd lost 3 customers and received 2 anonymous threats. Someone had spray-painted "abuser" on the side of my building, and Mrs. Peterson had called to say she'd be taking her Honda somewhere else from now on. I was scrubbing the paint off my wall when Jake arrived for work. He took one look at me and shook his head. "This is getting out of hand, Brad." "You think?" "I'm serious. This isn't just small-town gossip anymore. People are talking about boycotting the shop. My wife's book club spent 2 hours yesterday discussing whether they should support you or protect Natalie." I stopped scrubbing and looked at him. "What did your wife say?" "She said anyone who's been married for more than 5 minutes knows that there are two sides to every story, but she's in the minority." The bell above the door chimed, and we both turned to see who was coming in. It was Natalie, dressed in her most conservative outfit and wearing the kind of expression that belonged in a funeral home. "Hello, Brad," she said quietly. "Jake." Jake mumbled something about checking on the Ford in Bay 2 and disappeared, leaving us alone. "Quite a video," I said. "I didn't know Jessa was going to do that." "Didn't you?" She had the grace to look uncomfortable. Okay, maybe I knew she was planning something, but I didn't think it would be so intense. Intense. That's one word for it. Libelous is another. It's not libel if it's true. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Which part is true, Natalie? The part where you claim I've been emotionally abusing you for 5 years? The part where you say you're afraid of me? Or the part where you conveniently forget to mention that you've been screwing Derek for the past 3 months? Her face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Just like you don't know why his car is in our driveway 4 nights a week. Just like you don't know why he has opinions about our marriage and our finances and what kind of man I am." "Brad, here's what's going to happen," I interrupted. "You're going to call Jessa and tell her to take down that video. You're going to post a public apology admitting that you exaggerated the situation. And you're going to stop playing the victim in a situation that you created." "And if I don't?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. It was a photo of her and Derek kissing on our front porch, taken 3 nights ago with a telephoto lens from across the street. Then everyone gets to see what kind of victim you really are. She stared at the photo for a long moment, then looked back at me with something that might have been respect. "You've changed," she said. "You have no idea." She left without agreeing to my demands, which meant the war was about to get much worse. I spent the rest of the day preparing for the next phase, because I knew it was coming. People like Natalie and Derek and Jessa don't back down when they're cornered. They double down. The attack came that evening in the form of a police visit. Officer Martinez, no relation to Jessa despite the name, showed up at the shop just as I was closing up. "Evening, Brad. Got a few minutes to talk?" "Depends on what we're talking about." "Got a complaint about harassment. Someone says you've been following them, taking pictures, making threats." I nodded. "Let me guess. Derek Morrison?" "Can't say who made the complaint. But I have to ask, have you been engaging in any behavior that might be considered stalking or harassment?" "I've been documenting my wife's affair for potential divorce proceedings. All photos were taken from public property, and I haven't made contact with either party except when they initiated it." Officer Martinez looked relieved. "That's what I figured. Look, Brad, I've known you for 10 years. You're not the type to cause trouble. But this situation is getting a lot of attention, and people are talking. Maybe it's time to let the lawyers handle it." "Maybe it is." After he left, I sat in my office and made a list of everything I knew, everything I could prove, and everything I was willing to do about it. The list was longer than I'd expected. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. But they were about to learn the difference between someone who's willing to bend the rules and someone who's willing to break them completely. The final confrontation came at the annual Millbrook Summer Festival, held every August in the town square. It was one of those mandatory community events where everyone pretended to enjoy overpriced funnel cake and listen to local bands murder classic rock songs. Normally, I avoided it like the plague, but this year was different. This year, I had something to say. I'd spent the week making preparations. The festival always had an open mic session where local business owners could make announcements or thank sponsors. I'd signed up under Jake's name, claiming I wanted to promote the shop. What I actually wanted was 5 minutes on stage with the entire town as my audience. Natalie was there, of course, playing the role of the brave abuse survivor with Oscar-worthy dedication. She'd brought Derek as her support system, and they were holding hands while accepting sympathy from half the town. Jessa was documenting the whole thing for her social media, spinning it as a story about supporting survivors and believing women. It was perfect, really. They'd gathered everyone in one place to witness their performance, which meant everyone would be there to witness mine as well. I waited until the sun started setting, when the crowd was at its largest, and the alcohol had been flowing for a few hours. Then I walked up to the stage and took the microphone from Mayor Henderson, who looked confused, but didn't try to stop me. "Good evening, Millbrook," I said, my voice carrying across the square through the sound system. "For those who don't know me, I'm Brad Collins. I own Millbrook Automotive, and until recently, I was married to Natalie Collins." The crowd went quiet. I could see people pulling out their phones, getting ready to record whatever was about to happen. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about me lately. Some people think I'm an abusive husband. Some people think I'm a dangerous man. Some people think I'm a pathetic loser who doesn't deserve the woman he married. I paused, letting the words sink in. And you know what? Some of those people might be right. I could see Natalie in the crowd, her face pale with panic. Derek was trying to push through the people around them, probably planning to rush the stage. But the crowd was too thick, and security was nowhere to be seen. "But here's the thing about truth," I continued. "It's not always comfortable, it's not always pretty, and it's definitely not always convenient. So tonight I'm going to tell you some truths about the people who've been telling you what a terrible person I am." I pulled out my phone and held it up. This is a photo of my wife and Derek Morrison, taken last Tuesday night on the front porch of the house that I pay for. As you can see, they're engaged in what most people would call adultery. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. I could see the photo on the big screen behind me, crystal clear and unmistakably damning. Now, Derek here has been telling people that I'm a pathetic loser who doesn't deserve my wife. What he hasn't been telling people is that he owes the IRS $40,000, his business is failing, and he's been using my wife's real estate connections to try to find investors for his failing gym. Derek had finally made it to the front of the crowd. His face was red with rage, and he was shouting something I couldn't hear over the noise. "As for my wife," I continued, "she's been playing the victim pretty convincingly. But what she hasn't mentioned is that she's been lying to her boss about her work schedule, falsifying her sales reports, and using company resources to conduct her personal affairs." I clicked to the next photo on my phone, a screenshot of Natalie's timesheet compared to time-stamped photos of her at the gym during work hours. And then there's Jessa Martinez, our local influencer and champion of women's rights. What Jessa hasn't mentioned is that 80% of her social media followers are fake accounts she purchased online. Her sponsorship deals are based on fraudulent engagement numbers, and she's been using her platform to destroy people's reputations for personal gain. The crowd was getting louder, but I wasn't done yet. See, the thing about being called a villain is that it's actually pretty liberating. When people already think you're the bad guy, you don't have to worry about being polite anymore. You don't have to pretend that lies are truth, or that manipulation is love, or that fraud is success. Derek had apparently given up trying to reach the stage and was now shouting at the security guards, demanding that they stop me. But the security guards were just volunteers from the fire department, and they seemed as interested in hearing what I had to say as everyone else. "So here's my truth," I said, leaning into the microphone. "I'm not a perfect man. I'm not rich, I'm not sophisticated, and I'm definitely not the kind of guy who looks good in designer clothes. But I'm honest. I work hard. I pay my bills and keep my promises and treat people with respect until they prove they don't deserve it. I looked directly at Natalie, who was now crying, whether from shame or rage I couldn't tell. And when someone betrays that respect, when they lie and cheat and try to destroy my reputation to cover up their own failures, well, that's when I stop being the good guy. I set the microphone down and walked off the stage, leaving chaos in my wake. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, phones were recording from every angle, and I could hear Derek screaming threats that he'd never be able to follow through on. As I walked through the crowd toward the parking lot, people stepped aside to let me pass. Some looked angry, some looked shocked, but most looked impressed. Mrs. DeWitt actually started applauding, and a few other people joined in. I was almost to my truck when Derek finally caught up with me. He was sweating and red-faced, and his designer shirt was torn from pushing through the crowd. "You son of a jerk," he gasped. "You think you can just destroy people's lives because you're bitter about your failed marriage?" I turned to face him, and I must have looked different than he expected because he took a step back. "Derek," I said calmly, "I didn't destroy anything. I just turned on the lights and let people see what was already there. If you don't like what they saw, maybe you should have made different choices." He swung at me then, a wild haymaker that telegraphed itself from a mile away. I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him past me, straight into the side of a pickup truck. He bounced off the tailgate and landed hard on the asphalt, his perfect hair finally messed up. The crowd that had followed us from the stage cheered, and someone shouted, "World Star!" Derek tried to get up, slipped, and fell again. When he finally made it to his feet, his nose was bleeding and his shirt was completely ruined. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice was shaky and his eyes were unfocused. "Yeah, it is," I replied. "It's been over for a while now. You just didn't realize it." I got in my truck and drove away, leaving Derek bleeding in the parking lot and Natalie crying in front of half the town. In my rearview mirror, I could see people crowding around with their phones out, recording the aftermath of what would probably become Millbrook's most talked-about event in decades. My phone started buzzing with notifications before I'd even made it home. The video of my speech was already being shared across social media, along with dozens of different angles of Derek's failed attempt at assault. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. "Finally, someone who fights back. That's how you handle cheaters and liars. Brad Collins for mayor." I turned off my phone and sat on my front porch, looking out at the quiet street where I'd lived for 5 years. Tomorrow there would be consequences. Natalie would probably file for divorce, Derek might press charges, and Jessa would undoubtedly try to spin this into some kind of victim narrative. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the apologetic, accommodating version of myself that I'd become during my marriage, but the real me. The guy who didn't back down from a fight, who didn't let people walk all over him, who understood that sometimes being the villain was better than being a victim. The porch light across the street flickered on, and Mrs. DeWitt appeared in her doorway. She gave me a thumbs up and a smile before going back inside. I laughed out loud, alone on my porch in the summer darkness. They'd wanted a villain, and I'd given them one. But I'd also given them something else. The truth. And in a town built on gossip and appearances, sometimes the truth was the most villainous thing of all.